And just before the break, we were hearing from Kerry, who was raped at the age of 19. And we're talking about this because today is the start of Sexual Abuse and Sexual Violence Awareness Week. I should say some people may find the content of our discussion disturbing, but it is not intended to be that way at all. It's just about promoting awareness and also just letting people know who may have been through these sort of things that there is support available. Paula Gelling is the manager of Victim Support Isle of Man. Before we talk about this specifically, Paula, just remind us about the aims of victim support itself.
So victim support is there to support those affected by crime in all its aspects. So that might be something that has happened years and years ago, or might be something that's happened recently. So in terms of sexual assault, this really falls under that remit. So we're looking initially at the person that's been the victim of crime, but also those affected by that. So imagine like a ripple effect, and that would be the people outside from that. And it could be somebody who's witnessed something as well. So we also do the witness service, which can also be affected by crime.
And crucially, as we were hearing from Kerry, just because somebody comes to victim support doesn't necessarily mean that a crime has to be reported in order for people to be supported.
That's right. We're often about giving information. So sometimes people don't know the process about what would happen if they do report it. And we would discuss that through for their particular circumstances to what would happen if they were to report it, but also give them the options to what would happen and perhaps look at the options and the consequences if they didn't report it, but consequences if they did. And so they become more informed, so they can make a very much more informed and balanced choice as to what they want to do that's right for them, because that's it. As Kerry said, that person, the individual, has got to look after themselves first.
Now, speaking in the context of sexual abuse and sexual violence and listening to what Kerry told us, how typical would you say her experience was?
Yeah, fairly unusual in that, I suppose more than 50% probably report it, but in terms of it going to court and getting a conviction, that's happens less often, because of all the aspects that need to be gone through and the burden of proof that needs to be reached when somebody is convicted beyond reasonable doubt at court. But in terms of how people are affected by that, and numbers of people affected by that, in the last 2 years alone, ourselves at Victim Support, we had 150 new referrals of sexual assault in the last 2 years, and we've seen an increase. The police have seen an increase in the reports of sexual assault. So it is happening more often than people are reporting, but it may not be that it's actually happening more often that people are being assaulted. I think people are feeling more confident to be able to speak up about it. And that's what we want them to do. Is it's important to talk to people. Like Kerry said, it's important to talk. What we found, and even with our clients, it's the importance is not bottle it up. Do talk to somebody about it, because otherwise it goes off like a volcano after years. If people have literally bottled it up and keep it inside and can't talk about it, it goes off like a volcano. So I always encourage people, if they've been a victim of crime, victim of sexual assault, there, to talk to somebody about it, somebody you trust. That really is important.
And it's interesting what you say there, because at some point, if this perhaps happened a long time ago, and we are seeing an increase in the number of people coming forward reporting historic cases of sexual abuse, it does appear at some point something can trigger that memory.
Absolutely. Way back a few years ago, there was the Jimmy Savile elements, and that sparked a lot of emotions for people who've been through something similar. And they weren't a victim of Jimmy Savile's himself, but it was the other aspects that, the emotions that evoked in them. So they felt they wanted to talk, and they came forward and spoke to us. If I can say, our team at Victim Support are specially trained, and the welfare team are trained to support those affected by sexual assault. It's specialist training we do. And I'm an independent sexual violence advisor, the only one on the island. And again, that's a training and a qualification in that aspect to be able to support people for those affected specifically by sexual assaults.
And something very important, I think, to raise is that we're not just talking about female victims here. It's very important to emphasise that men need to be able to come forward too, and perhaps they might be more reluctant in some ways.
Absolutely. I'd call it a double whammy, really, in terms of if a male victim has been sexually assaulted, there's that the double trauma as to, do I report? What do people think? Male and female victims go through that, but I think it's more a conscious thing for them that, what will people think of me as well? So, but we are supporting male victims of sexual assault, and we're non-judgmental about that at all.
When it comes to some of the issues that Kerry raised, that notion of victim blaming, I think, is one, again, that we have spoken about before. But there must be a tendency with people who've gone through this to think, I must have done something wrong. I must have made myself a target in some way.
Yeah, and victims are it would appear sometimes that victims are what we call Velcro coated. The guilt seems to attach to them. Rather, the guilt needs to be in the right place. It should be with the perpetrator, but never is. The perpetrator is often Teflon coated. The guilt slides off them. And that's what we need to remember, is it's a feeling that the victims have, the survivors have. We need to recognise that. That's what they feel. That's genuine to them. But we need to try and place that. They shouldn't be the ones feeling the guilt, but they do. And again, it's not about what somebody's wear or how they've behaved. The act is by the perpetrator. It is not okay. This is all this message about sexual assault and sexual violence awareness week we're saying about, and hashtag it is not okay. It's the conversation we were having about having a cup of tea. If somebody asked for a cup of tea and then they change their mind, that's, people are allowed to change their mind, but it is not okay to force them to have a cup of tea.
That's a great way of explaining consent to fairly young children as well, I think, because we need to be having these conversations at an earlier stage. So just explain in more detail that cup of tea analogy for us. So
it's also about the... somebody might ask or go round to somebody's house for a cup of tea, and they might say, yeah, would you like a cup of tea? And the person replies, yes, I would like a cup of tea. And in the time it takes to boil the kettle and to make the cup of tea, the person might change their mind and decide they no longer wish a cup of tea. And this can be related back to a sexual incident, a sexual encounter. Somebody might initially say, oh yes, maybe that's okay, but before they've drunk the cup of tea, they might change their mind. And just because also they've had a cup of tea last week and now they're round again, doesn't mean to say they want a cup of tea again this week or every day for a week. But it's also to say that when somebody is unconscious or perhaps, worse the wear for drinking things, they cannot consent to having a cup of tea. So that cup of tea should never be forced upon. And this again is the analogy. So if somebody is concerned with drink or unconscious, they should not be sexually assaulted.
And Victim Support is using this this week to promote this awareness week.
Yes, that's just one of the tools that we're promoting on our Facebook and our Twitter page about the consent things. And, it needs to be with freedom and capacity that people consent to a sexual encounter.
Now, if somebody has experienced something, that fear of reporting it might be because the whole process seems so daunting. And I'm guessing that's something that Victim Support would talk people through. But typically, what could you expect to happen if you do report something like this to the police? So again, it's with their choice and with their permission, and we would talk that through them. So again, step by step, and what's for them at the right time. So some people might have reported, say, something that happened recently at the weekend. There's a better window for obtaining forensic information to be best obtained. So we would talk them through when that might be most appropriate. But also the team at the police station who would deal with these things, they are understanding, and they need to know a little bit about what's happened, not necessarily the detail. That would be a full interview. But the police would talk them through the process as to what would happen. They would need to make a complaint, and an official complaint is like taking a statement or a video interview, and that would need to be done. So a lot of in-depth thing. But there then is no guarantee. So the police would also discuss as to what would happen thereafter, about whether they would interview the perpetrator and arrest the perpetrator, and also what would happen if they go into court, because that's the understanding of the complaint, that would they be prepared to go to court, and the police arrest and interview them. And that's what they would need to explain that. But we've got to remember that a victim and survivor of a sexual assault would never need to be alone. So they can either bring somebody from Victim Support with them or down to the interview, and so they would always be accompanied. They should never ever feel alone. And again, if they end up going to court, if the case ends up going to court, we can support them when they go to court to be a witness, and so they are supported throughout the process. So from day one, they can be supported by Victim Support if they choose, right the way through the court process to the end. And even after that process is finished, I'm guessing Victim Support will still offer some sort of support, because for those people, even if it goes their way and there is a successful conviction, you're still emotionally dealing with quite a lot of issues.
That's right, and it's the emotional support that we can provide. We're not counsellors per se. Sometimes some people do need more in-depth support. But often the support that we provide is enough for people that enables them to get through that emotional roller coaster that's going on for them. They have up days, they have down days, have up hours and down hours, and we can support them through that time, and like I say, through the different aspects of it. And sometimes we might see them on a weekly basis, sometimes we might just have telephone and text contact with them, but nearer the time and come to the court, it might be daily basis, so depending on what's going on for them at that time, we work with their needs, and it's an individual basis rather than putting people in boxes and right, we'll only see you on this aspect.
So the main reason that we're talking about this today is because it is the start of the Sexual Abuse and Sexual Violence Awareness Week, and we've already touched on the idea that it's really something of a taboo subject. And what's so great about somebody like Kerry coming out is just saying there is no shame in this. Being a victim of a crime of this nature should not impact on you as a person.
That's right. And also the number or the rate of the crime, people perceive that it is a stranger. It was a stranger that happened to Kerry, but the actual numbers and the percentage and the statistics about rape and sexual assault, 88% of survivors of sexual assault, the perpetrator is known to the survivor. And that's our statistics here in the Isle of Man, statistics in the UK. So it's very high that the perpetrator is known to them.
And I guess then that's why it must be even more difficult in some cases to report it.
Oh, that's right. And there's consequences for reporting, and the what ifs, and oh my word, and perhaps might be family connections and the dynamics that go along with that, work colleagues and things. So it's not straightforward.
Before we talk a little bit about what Victim Support is doing to raise awareness this week, just remind people of the details of how they can get in touch with you.
So our contact number is 679950. Our email address is inquiries@victimsupport.im. We're open Monday to Friday, I'll say 8:30 to 4:30. We're also on Facebook at Victim Support Isle of Man, and our Twitter is Victim Sup or Victim_Sup, a complicated one.
We'll find the details of that and put it on the blog, as I say, after the programme. But I mentioned that you're wearing yellow, and this is key to this week, is it?
That's right. So we ourselves have decided to choose our colour, our Victim Support yellow. And so on Friday, it's all Dress in Yellow Day, and a lot of local companies are sort of getting on board with this and getting really excited about sort of their own interpretation of Dress in Yellow. So we've got Doxbond who've kicked off the week, and they're actually dressing in their yellow Doxbond bins, and it looks really fun. So, and that's just one of the ways, but some people are going to be eating yellow cakes, some people eating yellow fruit. We've got the Tower of Refuge is going to be lit in yellow, and various landmarks like the Town Hall in Douglas, the Courthouse in Ramsey, and the MEA building are all going to be lit in yellow.
I mean, it's great that so many people are getting behind this because, as we keep saying, it's not the easiest subject.
No, that's right. And Barclays Bank at Victoria Street are also really getting on board, their staff, and they're going to be selling our bright yellow lanyards for sale at £3 each down at Barclays Bank at Victoria Street. And there's going to be a beautiful yellow cake down there from Wednesday onwards that'll be raffled as well. And so the members of the public can pop in there and pick up and donate to Victim Support if they choose as well.
And how likely is it, do you think, having an awareness week like this will prompt some people who perhaps have kept something like this to themselves to come forward and speak to someone?
I would like to hope that people will feel confident to come forward and speak to us. We're not scary. We're just normal people, and we're here to help and support them. So please by all means contact us, have a chat. Like I say, you can contact us by email. So if they can sort of gauge how we are first off, they can, as we say to people, they can come and see us for 5 minutes or 50 minutes. It's their choice, and we're not nosy. Kerry rightly pointed out, don't probe. We don't probe. We know they've been a victim of a sexual assault. Apart from knowing perhaps the dynamics of the relationship, who the perpetrator was, we don't need to know the other details really. It's how they've been affected by it is more important than what we work with really, rather than the details and the minute details of the crime itself. That's a nosiness thing that people need to know. We know if they've been a victim of a sexual assault and then how to deal with it. If it's been recent, we would talk about the forensic side of it and what would need to be done if they needed to report that. But other than that, it's how we can support them emotionally and what's working for them or what's not working for them at the time.
Something else you're doing this week is working with Jeff the Mongoose and sort of raising awareness about certain issues. Yeah,
so things like revenge porn. So it might well be initially at a young couple, might be a more mature couple, my age, might be taking photographs of one another in an intimate relationship. But say the relationship goes sour, and those photographs might end up being shared around. And that isn't right. It isn't proper. And, there is some new legislation, the sexual offences legislation coming on board, and it's out for consultation and closing today, I believe. But circulation of an indecent image is against the law currently, never mind in the future. So that's not allowed. But it's also those photographs taken, it's a private, it's an intimate matter. So we need to be very, very careful as to how that occurs and how that happened. But we find it more common these days than we ever used to. People might be put under pressure to take to have the photographs taken when they might not feel confident or to have that done.
This is especially a conversation that parents need to be having with their teenagers as well, isn't it? Because, the idea that quite innocently in some ways, if you know what I mean, these pictures are sent and then just used really inappropriately. Yes,
that's right. And, they might go to the partner, but then the partner can send them anywhere, literally around the world. And yes, they might trust their partner whilst they're in that relationship. But say the relationship falls apart and, relationship breaks down, then that photograph could go anywhere. And sometimes people have used that to threaten to send to somebody's employee or the school, or to break down and that trust, or even as blackmail. And we've had people using those photographs and images. And even recently the police reported that through dating websites and things, those photographs have been used to blackmail people as well.
And that's happening over here?
Yeah.